6 and 6, where we cover 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. With that said, start your timer. Hello and happy Thanksgiving! And in honor of the American holiday, we begin today in outer space. Yeah, you heard me correctly, outer space, where even the American astronauts are sharing a meal. From BBC, quote, NASA astronauts aboard the International Space Station showcased their Thanksgiving meal ahead of the holiday. On Thursday, Don Pett, Nick Hague, and Sunta Williams and Barry Bunch Wilmore will enjoy vacuum-packed smoked turkey, Brussels sprouts, butternut squash. Williams and Wilmore remain on the ISS due to issues with the Boeing Starliner capsule that they arrived in back in June. Back on Earth in Asia, where Sri Lanka is attempting to dig itself out of a debt hole that has hung over the country for years. After their first ever default on their debt in 2022, the country's bonds have been rated junk by Moody's. With this new project, they hope to fix that. From Reuters, quote, the bond swap launched on Tuesday. It's an important part of the island nation's ongoing 12.5 billion debt restructuring and efforts to stabilize the economy. Moody's provisional rate to the new U.S. dollar-dominated debt offerings, CAA1, 3 notches above the current sovereign rating, though still deep in the quote-unquote junk category. The government offered micro-linked bonds, MLBs, and government-linked bonds, and a step-up in past-due interest bonds. Next, in Australia, where the prospect of banning multiple social media sites for children has continued to receive much pushback and lobbying efforts from the social media companies that would be involved, though LinkedIn, owned by Microsoft, has taken a different tact. From BBC, quote, LinkedIn simply does not have content interesting and appealing to minors, the Microsoft-owned company said in a submission to the Australian Senate committee. LinkedIn is, quote, arguing in its submission that it is a platform which is simply not of any interest to children. Its minimum age requirement of 16 means they cannot access it, the company said, adding it removes child accounts when found, end quote. Shifting focus towards Europe, where the coming election in Ireland has been mainly focused on the failure of the government to deliver a more effective and efficient public accommodation system, something the current Prime Minister has pledged to address. From Reuters, quote, despite billions of euros of windfall tax payments from U.S. multinationals giving Ireland the healthiest public finances in Europe, the campaign has been marked by stories of long wait lines for health procedures, housing, and disability care, end quote. Though the Prime Minister's party, Fine Gael, is likely to survive this election, some polls have shown a loss of faith by the public, which could spell out losses for the party down the road. Next to South America, where a new Peruvian megaport has been opened. Much of the funding came from Chinese entities, and this signals a blossoming relationship between Latin America and China. From BBC, quote, Peru's President Dina Boluarte was similarly enthusiastic, describing the megaport as a nerve center and would provide a, quote, point of connection to access the gigantic Asian market. But the implications go far beyond the fortunes of one small Asian nation. Once Chansey is fully up and running, goods from Chile, Ecuador, Colombia, and even Brazil are expected to pass through on their way to Shanghai and other Asian ports, end quote. Finishing today, we look to Africa, where there's a current shakeup brewing in the cocoa market in Ghana, the second largest cocoa producer in the world. From Reuters, quote, previously, Cocoa Bond would take on bank loans to buy farmers' cocoa, and then sell the contracts for the crop forward to international companies. But after being financially hobbled by declining production and management decisions, the regulator, for the first time since 1992, did not secure syndicated financing to purchase the season's crop, but instead is using the companies themselves. Cocoa Bond says bypassing the banks will slash costs, which is, of course, true, but the shift also marks a new era of risk for private players, the cocoa sector in Ghana, and the global chocolate industry. End quote. So by bypassing the banks, they no longer have to pay the interest that would be associated with the loans, and that therefore would be passing that cost on to the consumer. But as the article so greatly points out, this means that the companies and the producers are directly taking on some of the risk of their crop selling on international markets. We will return to this story, as we know everybody loves chocolate, in the future if there are any developments. And of course, I wanted to say, if you want to read any of these today, you can go to the links in the description below, that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the link to the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, and the podcast comes out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That is totally US focused. And if you want to go to a more laid back, less structured sort of thing, on Tuesdays as well, over at the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip, I post a Twitter tirade, and that comes out at the exact same time. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.